We chose non-automotive designers, coming from the world of product design and high-tech, precisely to ensure a result that is diametrically opposed to what has been done so far. Well, the least we can say is that they hit the bullseye.
No, not that. Not today, not now, not after everything you've done.
On Monday, May 25th, Ferrari unveiled its latest model, the Ferrari Luché, and if you're even a little interested in cars, you couldn't have missed it. It sparked a tornado, an avalanche, a tsunami of comments. Let's say 99.999% of them were negative. It looks like an apple mouse. My soap is prettier. It's powered by the kinetic energy of Enzo Ferrari rolling in his grave. That one's really funny. Negative comments on new cars are common and happen every time, but at least they spark a debate, with some for and some against. But here, the verdict is unanimous. This new Ferrari Luché is a failure. Ferrari's stock dropped by 8 the day after the presentation, and even the brand's legendary former CEO, Luca di Montezemolo, publicly destroyed this model.
You could say that this really hurt Ferrari. If he did that, it might ruin a myth, and I'm sorry about that.
Yet, the prancing horse put in a lot of effort only to present simply the worst car in its history. This is the very first 100% electric Ferrari. The result of 50 years of work in the utmost secrecy, 60 patents filed, a colossal investment, and above all, a completely unprecedented collaboration in the history of the brand. With a studio based not in Maranello but in San Francisco called Love From. Behind Love From are two men, Mark Newton and especially Sir Jonathan Ive, who designed the iPhone, iMac and iPod at Apple. We'll discuss this in detail shortly. There's a lot to discuss about this Ferrari. If you know me, you know we'll go in depth. Not just sharing my opinion, but really examining what we're seeing. But first, hello everyone and congratulations, you've lived long enough to see the Toyota Prius become better looking than a Ferrari. All this week, I've analyzed this Ferrari Luché in detail and talked with my fellow designers in the industry to gather the secrets behind this new model and put together the most comprehensive design breakdown video possible about this new Ferrari. So, what really happened? Why did Ferrari overhaul everything for its first electric car and trust their carefully managed image to people with no car design experience? We're going to discuss what no one has seen, what's truly hidden behind the Luché's design. It's more than style, it's a new philosophy that doesn't align with Ferrari. Before we get into the thick of it, you'll see that this video isn't sponsored. If you follow the channel, you know I've already made several videos about Ferrari, that I love this brand and that I don't have any deal with them. Honestly, unlike many influencers who try to make you think this car is amazing, I'm telling you the truth. So they don't look bad and can keep getting invited to events or get cars lent to them. I'm going to give you a complete analysis to tell you what I honestly think, just like I've always done on this channel. The sentence I read at the start of this video is from Flavio Manzoni, Ferrari's head of design. The man who has been leading the Maranello Design Center since 2010 and who designed the LaFerrari, the SF90 and supervised the 812 and the Puro Sangue. However, he explained very clearly in an interview with Rob Report that for the most important car of the last 20 years at Ferrari, they deliberately called on people who are not automotive designers to produce a result that is completely different from anything the brand has done so far. And to understand this choice, we have to go back a few years because this Ferrari Luché was not really a wanted child. It was born out of necessity. It's 2021 and Ferrari changes its boss. The new one is called Benedetto Vigna and it's an appointment that surprises everyone in the industry. Because Vigna isn't a car guy, he's a physicist, an engineer, a guy who spent his whole career in semiconductors at ST Microelectronics. He even took part in inventing the miniaturized accelerometers that are now found in all smartphones. He comes from a totally different world, and Ferrari's board chose him for a specific reason. Back in 2021, many people in the automotive industry were convinced that the future was electric. Tesla is booming on the stock market, Europe announces the end of combustion engines by 2035, China is 10 years ahead in battery technology, and Ferrari, still running V8S and V12S, is wondering how to reinvent itself in this new world. So, in 2022, Benedetto Vigna announces an ambitious plan. 40% of the Ferrari lineup will be electric by 2030. That's huge, and he promises the first fully electric Ferrari by 2025. Except the problem is, the market isn't following the forecasts at all. Porsche, once a leader in premium electric cars with the Taycan, is now seeing its sales collapse. Lamborghini is postponing its project indefinitely. Mercedes is cancelling its all-electric goals. Bentley is pushing theirs back by several years. And meanwhile, the ultra-rich clients who buy cars for 500,000 euros still want engines, noise, and emotion. That's actually what has made Aston Martin so successful, for example, in recent years. So now, Ferrari finds itself stuck in a completely absurd position. They've started investing billions to electrify the brand. They built a dedicated building in Maranello that they call the E-Building. They hired specialized engineers and filed dozens of patents. But a few months later, the market they're targeting says, "We don't want it." On October 9, 2025, Ferrari organizes the Capital Market Day. It's supposed to be the brand's big moment, the event where they unveil the strategic plan and present the technical foundations of the first electric Ferrari. But that day, Vigna does something unthinkable. A few months earlier, he announces that the 2022 plan is being scaled back. Instead of 40% electric in 2030, it will be only 20%, half of what was promised. And the rest will be 40% combustion only and 40% hybrid. Ferrari is basically admitting its electric plans were too ambitious, the market isn't interested, and they'll keep the V12 longer than planned. On the same day, Ferrari's stock drops by 15%. It's the worst trading session since the IPO in 2016, and analysts are furious. They believe Ferrari is either not bold enough or too stubborn about sticking with electric. Everyone is unhappy, which isn't necessarily bad. And it's exactly in this context that the Luché project arrives. Ferrari can't back down anymore. They've announced an electric car, they've invested, they've talked about it for years, they have no choice but to release this car. But they're not stupid or out of touch. They also know that their own clients, the real Ferrari fans, the ones who have 5 Ferraris in their garage, will never accept an electric car. The brand is making a strategic move that changes everything. The Luché isn't aimed at Ferrari fans, but at attracting new customers who've never owned a Ferrari. Families, tech entrepreneurs, new rich Asians, it doesn't matter. People who want a Ferrari but aren't really attached to the historic V12 myth. If you want to attract customers unfamiliar with Ferrari, you need someone who speaks their language. Who is more recognizable to the ultra-wealthy in tech than the man who designed their iPhone? For those who don't know the guy yet, Johnny Ive is considered an almost mythological legend in Silicon Valley, a demigod. Because he worked at Apple from the beginning, and of course he designed some iconic products. But above all, he redefined the way billions of people interact with technology. He imposed a vision where technology had to become simple and almost invisible, and it's clear that his minimalist aesthetic influenced practically the entire industry for more than 20 years. So if you have to create a tech product that's not a car, the best selling point is him. John Elkann, the chairman of Ferrari, picked up his phone to call him about this project, since he has personally known Johnny Ive for years. And it was perfect timing. The designer had left Apple in 2019 to start his own studio in San Francisco called Love From with his friend Mark Newton, an Australian industrial designer who has done everything in his life except mass-produced cars. By the way, the only car concept you can really credit them with is this one, the Ford 021C concept by Mark Newton. So, it has to be said that Johnny and Mark are both real car enthusiasts. They personally own several cars, Ferraris, a Bentley Continental S3 for one, and a Bugatti Type 59 for the other, for example. In short, they have car culture, but they're not professional car designers. No matter, John Elkann offers them something crazy, to take charge of the design of the very first fully electric Ferrari, interior, exterior, interface, everything. They accept, starting 5 years of work in strict secrecy, with confidentiality protocols rivaling the Pentagon. The documentary team following the project isn't even allowed to have a phone on site, and the project is so sensitive that for months, no one inside knows what the final car will look like. Ferrari, to dress all this up, is going to put a very unique communication strategy in place. Instead of presenting the car all at once, like all the other manufacturers, they decide to unveil it in 3 parts over 7 months. Act 1 in October 2025 is the unveiling of the chassis and the technology. There's no bodywork, it's just the mechanics, and it's at this moment that the stock price drops. Act 2 in February 2026, they unveil the interior in San Francisco and announce the official name Luché, which means light in Italian. And finally, Act 3 in May of this year, they finally unveil the exterior in Rome under the Calatrava Vela, a place where, exactly 79 years earlier, Ferrari had won the very first race in its history with the 125S. This 3-step strategy is extremely clever. It allows Ferrari to occupy the media space for months, but it's also extremely revealing. Why present the interior before the exterior when all other brands do the opposite? And why hide the car for so long? In reality, Ferrari very likely knew that the exterior would be divisive and that they needed to show the interior first, which is more universally appealing. To anchor in people's minds the idea that this Ferrari is a controlled revolution. Basically, they prepared the ground before the shock, except the interior, it was surprising. That's when we'll start seeing what Love From truly brought to Ferrari. On February 9th, 2026, Ferrari does something unusual. They invite about 100 hand-picked journalists, but not to Maranello, to San Francisco. That detail alone sends a message. Hosting a Ferrari event in San Francisco is like Hermes holding a fashion show in Shenzhen. It's not a neutral choice. Ferrari means Italy, it means Modena, it means Maranello. San Francisco means tech, Apple, and Silicon Valley. Picking this city to showcase a Ferrari's interior says, this car isn't from here, it's from elsewhere, and we're owning it. And that day, the world discovers a Ferrari cockpit that doesn't look like any other Ferrari cockpit. It's the first Ferrari with 5 seats, and every element in the cabin has a story. Let's start with the steering wheel. Ferrari had recently gotten us used to steering wheels covered in features, a bit like a PlayStation controller, like on the SF90 for example, where you literally have dozens of functions built into the steering wheel, including the touch start that sparked debate at the time. The Luché steering wheel is the complete opposite. It's a simple, classic 3-spoke steering wheel made of aluminum with a flat bottom and a few physical buttons carefully arranged, especially in these triangular elements that Ferrari calls the analog control modules. Physical buttons have returned throughout the cabin, on the ceiling, central adjustable screen, and climate controls with round air vents that adjust easily. Jonathan Ive explained this choice to Top Gear, saying that a large touchscreen doesn't work in a car. His words matter because he invented the touchscreen smartphone, yet now says touchscreens don't work in cars, despite many manufacturers choosing them recently. You don't need to be paid a lot to notice that. Anyone who's ever tried to adjust the AC using a touchscreen on a bumpy country road knows it. So when I see people saying this car is awesome just because it has physical buttons, I agree, that's great, but they just shouldn't have removed them in the first place. The second important thing is the screen. The good thing is that there's mainly a central screen that's not huge and one behind the steering wheel, which seems pretty modest compared to the rest of the market. On the other hand, my issue with this screen is its control handle, which feels like an ultrasound screen. While that might be very Apple, it doesn't convey Ferrari's prestige. Everything related to the interface, graphics, typography, animation, it'll remind you of something. It's exactly the same visual language as the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac. Same fonts, curves, and transitions. For the first time, a car's graphical interface resembles an Apple product. And I would even say that Ferrari deferred more to Johnny Ive than Johnny Ive adapted to Ferrari. In terms of materials, it actually looks quite high quality, even though in the official images at first, it looked really cheap. The seats and door panels have simple stitching reminiscent of classic Ferraris. It's subtle and matches the interior. The car key is unique, featuring an animation and a small screen that lights up when you start the car. What surprised me most when I first saw the images was the interior architecture. On almost any Ferrari for the past 80 years, the transmission runs through the middle and as a result, creates this cocoon-like feeling. On the Luché, the motors are in the wheels, so there's no internal transmission, leaving empty space under the dashboard. This creates a floating feel that resembles commercial vehicle design cues. It reinforced my sense that we're not dealing with a cohesive whole, but that everything was handled separately. Ferrari even states this in their official statement. I quote, "The interior is a celebration of hundreds of discrete products, each meticulously considered and treated with individual care. And here, we're getting to the heart of the matter." What Ive and Newson did on the Luché was to treat each element of the cabin as a standalone product. The steering wheel is an object, the door handle is an object. The same goes for the key and the start button. Coming from product design, it's probably easier to work on separate products and then assemble them afterwards. But a car isn't just a collection of products. For it to work, it has to be a world you enter where everything is part of a single whole. That's why everyone hates screens that are just stuck anywhere in recent cars. If I wanted to be provocative, I'd say the interior is treated just like an Apple store. Each product is placed on its own table, each product is celebrated individually, and even though they all share visual codes, each product has its own identity. And there's a word that keeps coming up in Ferrari's communication about this interior: simplification. The official line is that everything is simplified and streamlined to serve the driving experience. Everything is calm, spacious, made up of clean, distinct forms. If you've ever seen an Apple keynote, you've heard these words 1,000 times. I don't want to fall into the cliché of saying they just took over the never-released Apple Car project. The interior, buttons, Apple-style screens, and the assembly of separate products were the most universally agreed upon aspects. The easy part for Johnny and Mark, of course, because that's been their job for 30 years, but the real test for love from was the exterior. The first time I saw the Luché in real life, it took me a few seconds to realize I was looking at a Ferrari. That sentence was said very well by a journalist from Electrek who was there. Here's the proof right away. With a Lotus logo it works, with a BYD logo it works. With an MG or Xpeng logo, it works too. Without the prancing horse and without Ferrari red, no one would guess the brand. By the way, the main argument of those who want to find something interesting about this car is that it's not aimed at Ferrari's existing customers, but at new customers. As if that justified the fact that it's ugly, because as everyone knows, the new customers Ferrari is targeting are either blind or guys you can sell anything to. I think if it had an Apple car budget and sold for 70,000 euros, we might find the car modern or interesting in some ways, but for a Ferrari at 500,000 euros before options, it's just completely off the mark. The first and main reason is the proportions. It's a completely new silhouette that's very far from a sports car. It's more like a single-volume sedan, almost a minivan, or a kind of clumsy coupe SUV. By the way, the Luché is 5 meters long. It's the biggest Ferrari ever made and it's the heaviest. We're talking over 2.5 tons when loaded. That's already blasphemy, but there's more. What is really shocking is that instead of having a Ferrari that feels like it can dance like all the others, we have a massive, heavy, imposing object with huge masses that are very poorly hidden. Look at it in profile. That's where everything becomes clear. First of all, it has 23 and 24-inch wheels. That's gigantic, and it's a well-known technique to try to visually reduce the height of the car. For example, 21-inch wheels, which are already very large, would be disastrous. The cabin is centrally positioned due to the lack of a front engine, resulting in an extremely short hood, likely the shortest ever on a Ferrari, despite the highly curved windshield pushing the A-pillar back. The dash-to-axle line is unusually vertical, highlighting the awkward look caused by the car's height. And this height comes from the electric powertrain. So in this video, I'm not going to focus on the fact that it's a fully electric Ferrari. If the design had worked, fine, why not, but I don't want to discuss it. But despite everything, Ferrari doesn't escape the problems that make many electric cars massive and push manufacturers to offer us SUVs, the batteries in the floor. You can see it very clearly in this image. This choice of powertrain forces the batteries to be at the bottom, so you have to raise the seats, raise the roofline, and end up with a big chunk of bodywork instead of having a low, sleek, and streamlined car. When I say 90% of electric cars are naturally clumsy, it's not without reason. Even if there's a belt line trying to make the whole thing look more dynamic and bring a bit of light under the cabin to visually reduce the side, there are still plenty of things that lack finesse, even beyond the silhouette. For starters, the tail lights. The good news is that it's the only nod to Ferrari's history on the whole car, but they would have been better off being a bit higher since they look like they're floating, and that increases the feeling of height of the car even more. Next, the wheel design. There's one option that's nice, but there's another one. Honestly, Ferrari, okay, it's for aerodynamic purposes, but if we wanted to make an April Fool's joke to scare people, we couldn't have done it any differently. At the front, there's a big S duct for aerodynamics, but everything is flat and expressionless. It's really the default car, without personality, a visual signature that's not worked on at all, and a huge space on the wing between the front opening and the wheel that gives a sense of visual narrowness, even though they could have stretched it a bit to improve the car's stance. Another clear lack of finesse is the upright windshield wipers. Okay, it creates a smooth hood surface, but at this price it's reasonable to expect a subtler technology or a more refined way to conceal the windshield wipers. There's a large space above the rear wheel, but it's less noticeable because the cabin is black in all official photos. However, the configurator's flying bridge option restores the color and clearly shows the thickness again. Since we're discussing cabin thickness, we can now cover the car's most important idea, which reflects the philosophy we'll see later. Newson and Ive designed the Luché around a glass house, a glazed cabin. It's the entire upper volume of the car, so the windshield, side windows, rear window, and panoramic glass roof all form a single continuous fluid bubble that runs from the nose to the trunk. It's like a drop of water made of glass. This glass bubble is set into a colored aluminum shell that wraps around the lower part, so visually you have two distinct objects. And this theme chosen by the Love From team says a lot about the philosophy they've brought to this Ferrari. Mark Newton confirmed to Dyson what I said about the duality between the cabin and the bodywork. We separate the passenger cell, or glass house, from the aluminum shell that forms the bodywork. They coexist without interfering with each other. It may seem trivial, but it isn't. And it's a way of thinking that doesn't come from the automotive world. Since World War II, cars have been designed as a single, unified sculpture. Take any Ferrari, a 250 or a 296 Aroma, or an SF90, there's a connection between the cabin and the bodywork. It's fluid, it's a sequence of surfaces, and that's exactly why we talk about the muscles, the hips, or the shoulders of a car. Because even if we can distinguish several parts, we connect them as a single body. That's been the logic of automotive design since Pininfarina. Now look at your iPhone. In Johnny Ive's mind, an iPhone is two objects. A precious screen, where a lot of interesting things happen, set in a case that holds it. The screen is the treasure, the case is just the support, and all his genius at Apple for 20 years was about isolating the technology, the treasure from its support. Do you remember the iMac G3 in 1998? That's exactly it, a colored translucent case, and inside you see the precious object floating. Two elements, the container and the content, and the big black borders around iPhones, the bezels. Apple spent 15 years shrinking them generation after generation until they disappeared so the screen seems to float on its own. It visually separates the two objects. That's the signature of Johnny Ive, a simple, precious piece of technology, isolated and set into a structure that supports it. Same for MacBooks, where the keyboards are black, embedded in an aluminum shell. It's been the same worldview for 30 years. So when you ask him to design a car, he doesn't draw a car like an automotive designer. He draws a precious cabin, because that's what interests him, set inside a body that carries it. And that's exactly what the LUCE is. The cabin is the screen and treasure, with the colored shell like an iPhone supportive shell. Ferrari states this clearly in their press release. The glass house makes up the car's main surfaces. Primary, in other words, the main subject is the cabin, the bodywork is secondary, it serves the cabin, and that's a complete reversal of what Ferrari is. A Ferrari is often seen as something to admire from afar. The car on your childhood bedroom poster, the sculpture in your garage, or the one you film as it passes by. The treasure is the entire bodywork, sculpted to be desired by someone who isn't even inside. But the LUCE shifts the treasure from outside to inside. And suddenly you see why I've spent 5 years obsessing over the steering wheel, the glass key, and the buttons. That's his skill, and for him, the jewel is inside, the bodywork is just a case. Except that this logic works for an iPhone because it's the kind of object you use 8 hours a day. Its value is in its use. A Ferrari, you hardly ever use it. It only does a few thousand kilometers a year. If you're not an owner yourself, you see so few of them that every time is an event. Even if it's exceptional to drive, its real value has never really been in its use, but in the desire it creates when other people see it from the outside. So by shifting the focus to the interior, Johnny Ive didn't modernize Ferrari, he just turned an object of desire that allowed a brand to soar above the competition into a utilitarian object. He turned the maker of sculptures into a maker of gadgets that end up being compared with the Chinese ones. That's why people instinctively feel it's not a real Ferrari, even if they can't explain it, but I want to be very clear with you here. This isn't an argument against love from Johnny Ive or Mark Newson, who are outstanding designers. The iPhone and iMac changed the world, and that's undisputed. The interior of the LUCE, even if you might find it bland, is well executed. The thing is, automotive design isn't just product design on a larger scale. It's its own discipline, with distinct rules, culture, history, and hidden codes that take years to grasp, something I'm trying to explain on this channel. We have clear proof today that being able to design a great phone doesn't qualify you to design a car, just like knowing how to compose a symphony doesn't make you a good architect. They're really two different languages, and that's why the LUCE can be a great product design object that just fails to be a car people actually appreciate. And that pushes me to keep working on this channel to talk to you about automotive design seriously, taking the time, and not just reciting press releases. If you're still watching after 20 minutes, you're the type of enthusiast who truly loves Ferrari for its lines, proportions, history, and character. So, I have something for you. I've released a new poster collection dedicated to the F40 Enzo, Testarossa, and LaFerrari on my website Appel de Fer, and this time I'm breaking the rules. They're offered in a highly limited edition, only an A3 size ideal for an office, bedroom, or garage wall. Each car is hand-drawn, then worked on with a graphic tablet and printed in France on art paper, just like all my previous editions. Father's Day is coming up, so if you have a car enthusiast at home, now's a great time to gift a Ferrari poster. Also, as a sneak preview, I'm planning a big website overhaul this summer. This collection, in this format and price, is your last chance before everything changes. Also, all previous collections are deeply discounted for Father's Day. Get 30% off when you buy multiple models. The discount applies automatically at checkout, making it easy to build your collection. Visit Appel de Fer at appeldefer.com to support the channel, link in the description. First come, first served. See you in the next video. Bye.